how was the Virtues program born? I mean, how did the three of you get the inspiration to create the Virtues program?
My sister and her husband are both psychotherapists. Dan is a PhD shrink, specializing in pediatric psychology. My sister had been working in Victoria, British Columbia, as the spiritual care coordinator at a very highly respected hospice for people in the dying phase. And she was so deeply moved by the work with dying and with their families. And then she began to realize that people don't have a language that familiarizes them with the spiritual world in a way that's very real and very concrete. And in their work with the dying, as well as with children and families, they were aware that there was a real problem communicating with children about what their value is spiritually. I had left Los Angeles in total frustration at the materialism, those skewed values, and I needed a break, to be honest. So in moving to Canada, and especially a small island in beautiful British Columbia, which is not at all unlike the North Island of New Zealand, I was overwhelmed by the beauty of the place. So after a few months of just sort of drying, I shouldn't say drying out because I don't drink, but of sort of mellowing out, we put our heads together and said, you know, we have, among the three of us, writing skills, presenting skills, research skills, and design skills. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could use those to create materials to help children and families everywhere? And after a few small projects to sort of get our juices flowing, and for me to become more familiar with the computer and graphics on the desktop, we actually sat for a couple of days and prayed and meditated, as Baha'is are instructed and admonished to do, for guidance, because we really wanted to serve the world using the talents we had. And it is a miraculous thing that after that several days of just quiet reflection, 3 words seemed to appear out of nowhere: the Virtues Project. And once we heard those words, we literally sat down and filled sheets of paper with, what does this mean? What would this be? What would it look like? What would the programs and the publications be? And ultimately we settled on a book for kids and their parents that was then called the Virtues Guide. We later called it the Family Virtues Guide. So it was really born out of a sense of urgency, a sense of love, and a sense of service. And the result, after exactly 1 year and 1 week, was a dozen spiral-bound copies of this book that was about 150 pages long, something like that. And that first little trip on a seaplane to a little village in British Columbia, where we tested it among the native people, and they loved it. These virtues speak to the heart, they speak to the soul, and just hearing the words sometimes makes people smile, and then having a definition of those words is very, very helpful, and then having simple directions of how to practice the virtue, which is what the guide presents and the program provides, really gives people hope. And we're living in a very cynical time, as I don't need to remind your audience. There's dissension and strife the world over. People are retreating to a sort of a tribalism out of fear of other people who are different, either culturally or racially or religiously. And certainly the Baha'i message is that, you know, beneath all of the names we apply to each other, we're human beings, being human. And how do we define being human? It's being virtuous.